Okay, you guys, we're going to start this drawing. This drawing will get messy. It's kind of hard to explain until we're in the middle of it. So what I'm actually using, let me move it a little bit. I have a drawing board that is propped up with books, and I'm going to tape my piece of paper to the drawing board. Um, we're going to basically, the process is called subtractive charcoal. So we're going to cover this piece of paper with vine charcoal, smear it with our hands, and then use the eraser to get out the light parts, and the charcoal pencil or more vine charcoal for the darks. But basically, what you need to know before we start is that you can't rest your hand on the piece of paper because it's going to be all covered with vine charcoal. So if you could do this extra step that I'm doing right now and tilt your drawing space, you will be less likely to rest your hand on your piece of paper. Okay, so I have a piece of drawing paper taped to my wooden board that is propped up, and then I'm going to get a piece of vine charcoal. You could use vine or willow charcoal for this. I had a big piece of vine charcoal and then I just broke it in half. And then I'm going to use this piece of vine charcoal on its side, and I'm just trying to do an even layer. Vine charcoal's kind of funky though, so you may have to turn it. That first time, it was barely making a mark. I turned my piece of vine charcoal, and it makes a much better mark. So I'm just trying to cover this with vine charcoal. This is the time where you're lucky we're not in a classroom, because if we're all in a classroom doing this, invariably someone has squeaky charcoal, and it's like nails on chalkboard. It's awful. Okay. I am trying to make this image. So when I look at this image, overall, it's a pretty dark image. So I am not done putting vine charcoal on my paper yet. I still need a couple layers so it gets dark. So I went in one direction, like the bad band, and now I'm going in another direction. I'm trying to make a pretty dark piece of paper right now. Let's try turning it again. But I want it, it's kind of hard to explain. I want just a thin layer of charcoal on the top of this paper. I will be erasing some of this out. So I'm trying to be careful not to grind it into the paper, right? Because it needs to be able to be erased. And usually I go one direction, then I change the direction. How dark you go is kind of dependent on the image that you're using. Because my image has a really dark background, I'm trying to make this pretty dark. But if my image had a lighter background, I would be okay where it's at now, you know? It just depends on your image. And you'll see through the process, like doing this now, it'll save me time in the end if I can make it dark enough. That's actually pretty good. Now, I want the charcoal, like I said, not ground in, but I also want it to look seamless, like a machine did it. So when I look at my image right now, I have a big, can you see that big clump of charcoal? I want to get rid of that. I don't want it to look streaky at all. So you have an option. You can use your hand to try to blend this, or you could have a paper towel, or toilet paper, or sometimes in the art supply store, they sell like a chamois cloth. It's for this. I don't mind getting dirty, so I'm just going to use my hand. And again, I'm worried about erasing this eventually. So I'm just trying to lightly rub this together. I'm really trying to get rid of that line up top. Okay, that looks a little better. Okay, so step 2 is I get my vine charcoal and I'm going to draw in the picture using the vine charcoal. So it's what we've been doing all semester long, in that we're just doing a line drawing right now, but we're using vine charcoal to do the line drawing. And then as I draw, I'm also trying to look at where the shadow is, like where the image is, where the top of the table kind of is implied. So I have the ball slightly in the lower left-hand side of the drawing. I have a cast shadow below that, and it kind of goes to the right. It's kind of hard to see the edge of that cast shadow because it kind of gets fuzzy, but I'm just going to squint my eyes. Okay, I'm having technical difficulties today, but I'm still going through. So, step one, we toned the whole piece of paper with charcoal, with vine charcoal. Step two, we use that same piece of vine charcoal to do the drawing. And now I'm going to also put in the shape of that shadow. So I can pretty clearly see that the top left part of this ball is light and the bottom right is in shadow. So I'm just going to draw in a line, kind of approximating where that change takes place. Now, we could have a lot of arguments about that, like, there's not a line there, it's a fuzzy thing. Just do your best. What I'm really marking for myself right now is where I'm going to go dark with the vine charcoal and where I'm going to use the eraser to go light. Okay, now I didn't tell you guys, but we're using vine charcoal, and you'll see this very quickly because we prepared our page with vine charcoal. So if we make any mistake at all, like I'm not sure what line is the bottom of the ball, I can just use my finger to erase that and redraw that in. Today, you're kind of meeting vine charcoal for the first time. So you have to decide if you love this or not. I like it to a point, but it's not my thing. I prefer graphite, but you guys will see how you feel about it. Okay, so that's my drawing. I now know where my shadows are. I know where my light is, so I'm ready to move on. Step 3, you have a choice. We could either develop our shadows or work to pull out our lights. I think we should develop our shadows a little bit more. So when I look at this drawing, what needs to be darker? I think the cast shadow definitely has to be a little darker. I think this shadow here can be darker, but especially up here. And then this, the top of the background, can be darker. So, again, this is like personal taste. How much do you like vine charcoal? I don't like vine charcoal a lot, but it's good for making things darker quickly. So I'm going to use it for this step. And I'm actually turning this a little bit. And I'm making hatch lines like we did with graphite, except vine charcoal is so easy to blend and smear, so I can be a lot messier with my hatch lines. I don't have to be as patient. Let's do something similar in this ball. I don't want to go too dark down here, so I'm kind of trying to be gentle with my hatch lines. I don't want to lose the separation of the ball and the cast shadow. And then also, let's go dark up here. Okay, I'm going to move my phone for a minute. And then I could keep on doing hatch lines, but I could also, oh, see, it's starting to make that terrible noise. I could also use the side of the vine charcoal. Okay. Now, about now, I feel like this is the area where I'm like, have I gone as far as I can go with vine charcoal? Fine charcoal makes me personally nervous because I know just like we erased it, I can, if anyone walks by my drawing, I guess this is more worrisome in the classroom or not, depending on how crazy your house or apartment is. If anyone walks by your drawing and touches it, they can erase it. So after I do one layer of vine charcoal on all my shadows, I get a finger or a tissue again, and I just try to blend that out a little bit more to get rid of those messy hatch lines, but still leave some vine charcoal. And if your finger is dirty, you will not pick up as much vine charcoal. So my fingers are getting pretty dirty, which is an advantage right now. But if I was using a new, I was going to say a new finger, like we get new fingers. If I was using a finger that wasn't dirty, that was clean, it's going to pick up a lot of vine charcoal. So you kind of have to be aware. This sounds crazy, but I try to have one dirty finger and like one less dirty finger so I can kind of control how much vine charcoal it's going to pick up. Okay, so when we drew contour and cross contour, you guys, I didn't let you like start on one object and get detail, right? And I'm going to do the same thing with shading. So I'm going to work on my shadows a little bit, and then I'm going to switch and I'm going to work on my lights. And then I'm going to come back to my shadows. So I'm kind of getting to a place where I'm like, should I switch to my lights? But just because I'm worried about my drawing smearing, I'm now going to pick up my charcoal pencil and I'm going to just lightly try to put in some lines here so that if anyone walked by, my drawing would be okay. There's a couple things to be careful of. One thing we need to be careful of is we don't want to end up with a thick, dark outline. And some of us are going to just naturally do that. When we draw, we start with lines. It's kind of crazy. We start with lines and we outline the figures. But then when we shade, eventually, I want to get, I'll try to explain it this way. I want to get this barrier right here. Like I want to show the bottom of the ball by just an area of real dark from the cast shadow next to an area that's slightly lighter, the reflected light. If I have this thick, dark line outlining the ball, it doesn't look as realistic, and it can start to look kind of childlike or something. It'll look a little more sophisticated without dark outlines. So when I pick up my charcoal pencil and I do that line, I just make sure that my pencil is sharp and I'm not pressing hard so I get a nice thin line. Okay, so I'm just going to keep on putting in some hatch lines here, but again, I have to remind myself now, Samantha, don't get too carried away. But I do want to mark. And I said when we used vine charcoal, we could be messy. When we use charcoal pencil, we can be a little messier, but I still try to be pretty nice and clean with my hatch marks, similar to how I use graphite. So I'm putting the lines about an inch long, and I'm trying to put them close together, and I'm lightening up my pressure somewhat because, like we talked about cast shadow before, as it goes away from the object, it seems to get a little lighter. Okay. Now let's go to the shadow on this ball. This area of the ball feels very dark against the background, so let's darken in that. I think I'm going to have to darken my background slightly, right? I don't know that it's dark enough. So now when I work on darkening things, I always have a choice with charcoal. I could use vine charcoal to darken it, or I could use charcoal pencil. And one is not more right than the other. It's just a personal choice. I prefer my charcoal pencil usually. I don't know, this is a big area, so I might use vine charcoal to darken that. But I have some students that draw so well and they use vine charcoal for practically the whole thing. Just trying to darken this a little bit, but especially darken up here, right? And so to get something a little darker, I'm just adding layers of hatch lines. And once again, I like hatch lines, so I'm not blending these out. But if you wanted to, you could use your you could use the blending stump that we made, or you could use still the same thing we used before to blend out the vine charcoal when we prepared the paper. So you could use a paper towel or a chamois cloth. Okay, I lied. That's my dirtiest finger. Let's try to blend it a little bit. Charcoal can be so nice, you guys. I'm smiling as I do this because it's so somehow satisfying, right? Am I the only person that thinks that's satisfying? So it's personal taste. Oh, sorry. It's personal taste how when you use vine charcoal and when you use charcoal pencil, and you're going to make that choice just by using both and seeing what you prefer. And it's also personal taste of whether you want to blend out hatch lines or not. Okay, I'm getting too much of a perfectionist. So let's take a break from our shadows. And now I'm going to work on my favorite thing, which is the lights. So I get my kneaded eraser and I move it around. And then it's super light in here. So I'm going to use my kneaded eraser to pick up some of this light. Now this is a little confusing, so try to follow me. In this light section, it's not all the same lightness. We talked about highlights and midtones. I don't know that this ball really has a highlight, but it seems to get lighter right here in this section, right? Oh, look. Modern technology. Okay, it seems to get lighter right in this section, and this is still in light. It's just not as light. So when I use my kneaded eraser, I'm going to put it down in the lightest section. And just like my fingers, when the kneaded eraser is clean, it's going to pick up a lot of charcoal. But as it gets a little dirty, it won't pick up so much charcoal, and I'm not pressing so hard with it. I'm just saying my main point is this, you guys. Don't go crazy with your kneaded eraser unless you're doing like the highlight section and then or the lightest of the light section. But try to leave some of that charcoal there for the like darker midtone section. What do you guys think? And look, you can move your kneaded eraser. I want to get this edge, so I'm going to kind of try to make it into a point and then go along that line. Oh, nice. Okay, so that's basically how I'm going to do this drawing. Now I'm just going to keep on going. So I think my lights are pretty good right now, but I feel like this drawing is going to look so much better if I can get my background darker. I think this ball will pop out a little more. So we were discussing it before. Let's try using a little bit of the vine charcoal to do another layer on the background. And again, art is something that it's workable, right? So this was my first step, but I'm going back to it and it's not a big problem. It's great. I can do that, no problem. I just want to be careful when I try to blend it. Oh, dirty finger. This, incidentally, is why we have our paper raised. Do you guys know? I mean, why we don't have the paper flat. Do you now understand why I have to be really careful about resting my hand on that paper. That's like a nightmare if I did that. Okay, so a couple tips for you guys are you want to go dark. Our natural tendency is to be like, oh, that's dark enough. But then we'll have one student in the class that's like, no, totally needs to be darker. And they'll push it and go even darker, and their drawing is going to look so good. So really try to push yourself not to play it safe and to go dark. Play it safe in the rest of your life, especially in the time of COVID-19, right? But go dark in your drawings. And then the other tip is just repeating what I said before. Try to be really careful as I'm trying to deal with it right now, not to have an outline on your objects. It's going to make it look very childish if you have an outline. If you're doing like animation, an outline is great, but we're trying to do realistic, not animation. So it's just not appropriate for this type of drawing. And we'll probably see that in the student work also, you guys. In the class discussion, we'll see students trying to avoid that outline. Okay, so the good thing about charcoal is it goes dark pretty quickly. So in graphite, I have more control. In charcoal, I can go dark pretty quick. Pretty nice. And I'm doing this kind of brute force, kind of messy. Like, ideally, I should have a blending stump. I should be a little more patient. But I'm just trying to get this done for you guys to see the idea. And this is called subtractive drawing because I'm using the eraser to subtract the charcoal in the light. Okay, is that dark enough? No, that's not dark enough. Let's go darker. Again, careful of the edges. If I can just have that ball against the gray background, that'll be much better. See where I have that little line? I may have to get my eraser and try to get rid of that. Okay, third tip. When we draw, we concentrate so much on the object, trying to make sure the light is right on the object. But actually, trying to make this smaller now. Actually, if you get the light correct around the object, so like on the tabletop, the part I'm doing right now, that can really help with the light on the object. So basically I'm saying, don't forget about the rest of the space. And when we draw, we tend to forget about the rest of the space. But again, we'll have like some student in the class that does this really nice background, and the drawing will look so much better than anyone else's. So in a way, we're drawing the object, but in another way, we're drawing the light falling on the object. And if we draw the light falling on the object and the light falling on that table as well, that really helps convey that message. So just don't forget about the background. And this is kind of like a boring subject, right? It's like a ball on a table. That's so boring. But always in your drawing, the background is important. Okay, so I'm tired of blending it. I'm going to now try to go and develop this, but I'm letting myself know I'm not going to blend this. So I'm trying to be careful about my edges. So this shadow edge we talked about before, it's nice and soft. So I'm just doing hatch lines that extend past that regular line I drew. And this is just about control of the material. And you have to practice to get control of the material. So I'm making you guys do this one, this drawing, but I would really suggest drawing a couple more drawings, and they could just be small, but you want to get it where you understand what kind of marks work well with vine charcoal and what kind of marks work well with charcoal pencil for you, for the way you press and handle the work, the material. And then as I'm drawing, I'm holding my body back. You guys can't see it, but I'm holding my body back and I'm thinking, is that dark enough? Should I go darker? Okay, slowly starting to work, right? Now let's go back to that cast shadow. I love light and shadow. It's like my favorite thing. So I actually can kind of lose track and get into this. And then in something that may make no sense at all, as I'm working on this part, out of the corner of my eye, I'm kind of feeling this against this and thinking, should I go darker here? And I think I should, right? Like as I work darkening this, I look at the picture and it needs to be way darker, right? Still. So I'm going to go back in a couple minutes and still darken that shadow further. It's, again, it's all about making that shadow dark enough. And then I'm also paying attention, like this is kind of a hard edge, right? The bald versus the background, but this is nice and soft. So I'm just trying to look and see if I have that. If you had a blending stump, that'll help you a lot getting soft edges. But I actually like the challenge of using my pencil hatch lines to do it. I feel like my pencil, if I keep it sharp and I keep my hatch lines under control, my pencil can almost be like a surgeon's scalpel in drawing. But again, that's personal stuff, right? Like you may be like, lady, give me some vine charcoal. And as long as your drawing comes out good, I'm good with that. So when I darken in that part, I have to also darken in that shadow edge. Drawing is about relationships. So if I darken in one point, I probably have to darken in somewhere else, you know? Be careful about that edge. Needs to go brighter, right? I have to switch off and go back to my bright lights and kind of lighten them up. So subtractive charcoal can be so good, you guys, but are you starting to see the weakness of it? The weakness is sometimes your lights aren't as light as you want. And we could try a different eraser. Like if I want to get this lighter, I'm going to use this, but I'm going to press a little bit more. Because when here, I feel like there's almost like a glow or something to the top of the ball. I'm losing the shape of it. But yeah, so sometimes our lights, like it's really hard to get back to the white of the paper. And in that case, we could try other erasers. Like I would use a regular pencil eraser, you know? I'm worried about picking up too much charcoal. This drawing works best for those of us that aren't scared of getting dirty. If you're a little worried about getting dirty, this is not going to be your preferred drawing. But charcoal is totally washable. So if it gets on your clothes, they're not stained. It'll just wash right out. Okay, so I'm working here, but I'm kind of feeling here. It needs to be darker, I think, a little bit more, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's kind of a little bit on the crazy art teacher thing. Okay. What's really going to happen is I can just keep on working, darkening this in more and more to develop the drawing. But again, our goal is just to get a very good contrast between the darks and the lights. A boring drawing is going to be like, oh, it's all pretty much gray. An exciting drawing is going to have areas that are almost pure black and then other areas that are almost pure white. So you really want to push yourself to get these extremes in the drawing. I think actually darker here, right? Still darker on the background. I'm resisting using that vine charcoal. I got my vine charcoal from Michael's and it's kind of funky. For some reason, it doesn't go on so well. So I'll just use my charcoal pencil instead of my vine charcoal. If I wasn't doing this for the camera, I would untape this and change its direction of the paper, you know, because your hand can naturally do hatch lines in certain directions, you know, and if you're having problems, you can change the paper the way it's laid out and you'll have an easier time doing hatch lines. But I'm trying to go quick. Trying to go quick. Now look at this background. This is a really good example. It's dark here and goes light here. So let's try to get that. So as we draw, we'll notice more things. You know, when you first look at something, you see the overall image, but as you draw, you'll start to notice details. And that means you're observing well. That's great news. That's what you want. If you're drawing and the thing you're like, yeah, whatever, that comes across. So you really have to care. And I know it's hard to care, you guys, about random still life. But we won't always be doing random still life. We're going to be doing people's faces, things like that. So you have to bring your attention and care to the thing you're drawing. Okay, that's pretty good. I could just keep on going darkening, but that's basically how we do it. So step 1, we use the vine charcoal to tone the paper. Step 2, use the vine charcoal to draw the items, separating the light from the shadow. Step 3, your choice. You could use the vine charcoal to shade in all the shadows and then get your kneaded eraser and do the lights, or you could reverse those. And then I switch after one layer of vine charcoal on my shadows to charcoal pencil. But if you want, you could keep on going with the vine charcoal. It's just by the end, do at least one layer of charcoal pencil on all the shadows, because I can still walk by and like erase it, but the charcoal pencil is harder to erase. So try to end with a layer of charcoal pencil on your shadows, and it'll kind of work as almost fixative in a way. Okay, then what you should do is take a picture of this. You should take a picture during the day. You guys are having a hard time with pictures because you're taking them at night. So try to take a picture during the day, either outside in the shade or by a window at home. And then you should spray this drawing with fixative because it's so easy to smear. We need to spray it with something that'll hold the charcoal down. And that's what fixative is. Fixative is highly, highly toxic and poisonous, though. You have to spray it outside your house or apartment. Do not spray it inside. If we were in the classroom, I would march you guys all outside to spray your drawings. I'm a kind of lazy person, and I never spray fixative inside. It's very poisonous and toxic. So when you're all done, you're going to get your spray bottle, go outside and spray your drawing, okay? Okay, you guys, I hope that's good.